Hello, and we are going to talk about supply and demand for oil. Before we get started, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Amanda. This will be my second presentation for this class. And again, we are talking about the oil company, so that is why we're talking about their supply and demand. Anyways, we are going to move on to the next slide. I actually like talking about supply and demand. I think it's very important for production. And I also think, or I know that for inventory purposes, there is a lot of supply and demand that go on in the warehouse. I'm currently working at a CPA firm as of right now as an auditor. I just started about 3 months ago, so inventory observations are very fun, and it's fun to know about quality control and things like that, but also deeper inside where you probably won't know as much, but you can, because supply and demand, I always think about for Florida, I always think about like hurricanes, and when, obviously a hurricane's coming, everybody wants to be the prepper and they want to buy all the water and everything out of the shelves and Walmarts and go pretty much crazy for just to be prepped for the hurricane. Well, your demand on that is going to increase significantly because everybody's going to want flashlights and water and generators and things like that, and that's what you look at when you're producing those types of items and hurricane season is around. So anyways, that is just my introduction. We're going to move on to 2. So what is supply and demand? And I just put on here, like, it is the backbone of a market economy. Plain and simple. I'm going to go in depth more in my notes. So we're just going to go from there. And demand refers to how much quantity of a product or service is preferred by buyers. The quantity demand is amount of a product people are willing to buy at a certain price. The relationship between price and quantity demand is known as the demand relationship. Supply represents how much the market can offer. The quantity supplied refers to the amount of a certain good producers are willing to supply when receiving a certain price. The connection between price and how much a good or service is supplied to the market is known as the supply relationship. Equilibrium is the allocation of goods is at its most efficient because the amount of goods being supplied is exactly the amount of goods being demanded. So that's why you think of equilibrium, you think of equal, and I would just say that supply and demand have hit that point where they're just exact. There's enough supplies, and the demand is at its peak as well. Like, it is just the same level. Moving on. So that's just the overall generics. That is the supply and demand. If you remember that it's the backbone of the market economy, that's a good way to just know. And then demand, quantity of a product or service preferred by buyers, and then supply represents how much the market can offer. So, alrighty. And that means if you go into a store and say there's, I don't know, I prefer some drugstore makeup, and usually when YouTubers, I know people know that YouTube is huge in makeup and followers and things like that. So when I go to have a review, I don't just look at their reviews online. I look at the influencers that have actually tried the product. So usually the product that is most liked, it's sold out by the time I get there. So the supply obviously was lacking in that department, and the demand increased way more than they expected because of that influencer on the product. So that was just an example. But moving on. So number 3. So we're just going to go into the changes that on like oil and what could spike the price, shift the demand, shift the supply. So for this one is restriction on drilling. So if you have regulations that are passed to restrict drilling areas, then it will decrease the oil supply in the economy while prices remain the same. The supplier will be forced to supply less quantity at the same price. Excuse me. If the supply, that's supposed to be a Y and I'll fix that, is affected by the factors other than the prices, it shifts the supply curve to the left from the blue line, and I just put S1 in parentheses so you knew what I was talking about, but to the pink line, which it looks orange on here, and I'm not sure if it changed colors. Sorry, I'll change that to orange as shown above. According to the shift in supply curve, the quantity supplied will decrease from Q1 to Q2. And it's showing you how it's shifting with the supply. Yeah, it will increase the price from P1 to P2. So it's just showing you on the side, you see the price of oil, and yeah, the quantity of oil is at the bottom, and then the new equilibrium price and quantity will be P2 and Q2. So when you do the equilibrium, you follow P2 over, and P2 is kind of between 2 and 2.5. And by the way, those numbers, they just popped up on there when I made this graph, so it wasn't like anything particular because we weren't like saying like, obviously I don't have like their pricing in front of me, so I just kind of like went with those numbers, and they're just on there for show. But it's good because I can say, between 2 and 2.5 you come over, and then you drop down to Q2, and that's where your equilibrium is. It's where it meets that point where the quantity and the price is equal. Your demand and your supply are equal. Okay? Alright, we're moving on to the next change. So, increased birth rate and population. Increase in birth rate and population will increase consumption of oil. This will increase the demand for the oil in the economy while prices remain the same. If the demand is affected by the factors other than prices, it shifts the demand curve to the right from D1 to D2 as shown above. So you can see D1 and D2. I kind of hope that you can see that because that's labeled up. The quantity demand will increase from Q1 to Q2. Also, it will increase the price from P1 to P2. Equilibrium price and quantity will be P2 and Q2. So again, you just follow P2 in the middle of 1.5 and 2, come over, drop down to Q2, and follow Q2 up, and that's where your equilibrium is between the supply and the demand. Excuse me. So that's interesting. Also, in each one of these, only one shifts, so that's how it should be, as in the directions. Moving on, a recession occurs. So, a recession causes people to lose employment and income becomes reduced. It forces them to reduce their consumption. Therefore, the demand for oil will decrease in this case. The prices are unaffected in the short term. The demand curve will shift to the left from D1 to D2. Yes, and quantity demanded will reduce from Q1 to Q2 as shown above. The prices will decrease from P1 to P2, as you can see, and then the equilibrium price and quantity will be P2 to Q2. So same So one you can go all the way over to Q2, drop, and there's your meat right there for equilibrium. If I didn't explain this before, how to read this graph, quantity of oil is at the bottom, and then price of oil is on the side. So you know your X and Y when reading this graph. Okay. And that is it for that one. I mean, this makes a lot of sense, demand, because your demand's gonna, of course, when a recession occurs, your demand's gonna move extremely, probably, as shown in the graph. But that makes perfect sense to me. So, we're moving on. Affordable energy sources. So this is like, what I take this as is like, if you guys know the car, the Tesla, it is battery only. So like literally they have charging docks, and I'm sure a lot of people know this already, but I'm just like, as an example, I didn't put this in my notes down there, but as I was recording, I was just wanting to relate that to this. So that is something like, if somebody knows that they can save money that way, or the case may be, charge their car, it probably will be less expensive to them, because gas can get expensive. I mean, it's pretty up there, so it's interesting to know. If there's an increase in availability, I'm just going to read my notes for now, but if there is an increase in availability of affordable alternative energy sources, people will tend to buy more energy sources. It will reduce the demand for the oil in the economy. As the oil prices will not change, this will shift the demand curve to the left from D1 to D2. And quantity demanded will reduce from Q1 to Q2 as shown above. The oil prices will decrease from P1 to P2. The equilibrium price and quantity will be P2 and Q2. So yeah, the prices went down, and your curve went to the left. So that was the last one of the changes for the oil company. We're going to conclude. So I just put, after reviewing the changes, what are the main differences between supply and demand? What relationship do they form? What other causes may shift the supply and demand? So I put, demand is the desire of a buyer and their ability to pay for a particular commodity at a specific price. Supply is the quantity of a commodity which is made available by the producers to its consumers at a certain price. When demand increases, supply decreases. Inverse relationship. So that was the relationship inverse. Demand decreases, supply increases. Just a very flip-flop. So what other causes may shift the supply and demand? So I'm going to do supply first. Supply can be shifted by input prices, improvements in technology, government policy, size of the market, time, and expectations. So I'm just going to run through these examples real quick. And it's just saying, if the price of a raw materials used in production of a product goes down, then S will increase, vice versa. If there's a major technology changes, example, USB storage increases and sold at a lower price. So they're saying, like, if you have an 8 gigabyte and now they have a 20 gigabyte, but it's less dollars, then that will cause that. Subsidy on a good increases the supplies, market increases supply, increases time will also increase it, like capacity. And then increased population and anticipation of future increases. Demand shifts, and then last one, demand shifts due to change in buyer taste, change in number of buyers, change in income, change in prices of related goods, and change in consumer expectations. And that is it, guys.